Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the Co-Liv Summit live studio here from Paris. My name is Guy again, and I'm really glad to welcome everybody that has been joining us this morning, today, this afternoon, wherever you're Skyping in from or Zooming in from. It's a big honor to have you here. Now, for today, the next panel is around a topic that is important and that sets the foundation of one of the core pillars of co-living, and that is design and how to design co-living and co-living spaces around one specific topic, and that is around community, well-being, and sustainability. And so I have the honor to introduce you three amazing experts from this field. We're having Kelsea Crawford, who is the co-founder and CEO of Cate Studio, an architecture studio. We then have Laura Sundin, who is joining us live from, are you in Paris, Laura?
Yeah, I'm in Paris.
She is in Paris as well, who is a design and build group manager at Dove Vivo. And we're having our third amazing speaker, Tom Manwell, who is one of the co-founders and lead architect at Conscious Co-Living and also at Wellbeing Architecture.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And our amazing moderator, I'm going to give the mic back to Cate Maiolini, who's going to moderate here live from Paris.
Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome back, everybody. Hi, guys at home. Hi, Laura. Hi, Tom. Sorry you couldn't be here. And Kelsey, thank you for actually stepping out and coming here. Really appreciate it. So, Guy, thank you also for introducing our fantastic speaker who are going to take us into a journey of these three architects who are actually going to share, because it's all about sharing, as our Laura always says, their professional best practices and top tips after over 3 years of doing co-living projects from concept to execution. So we have a few slides that I'm going to play whilst they are introducing themselves. And we are going to start with our lovely Kelsey.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Do I need to stand up or I go? No, I can stay seated? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Hey, Laura. Hey, Tom.
Hello there. Great to see you.
Hi. The three of us know each other, so it's fun to be on a panel together and with some great experts. So this is really lovely today. As Guy mentioned, my name is Kelsea Crawford. I'm the founder of Cutwork. And Cutwork is an architecture and design studio specialized in new ways to live and work. So we're really looking at new typologies of housing, especially in the shared environment. And co-living is really one of our favorite places to be exploring today. I'm also the ambassador of France for Co-Liv with Fabrice Simondi, which some of you may know. So I help run the France meetups and help make the community in France stronger. As you can see on the slide, these are some of the projects that we've been working on, some of the images that we've done. We're working with some amazing pioneers in the market of co-living. As some of you may know, and I'll show another slide after, but we designed Flatmates, which is one of the largest co-living spaces in France. It's 600-bed co-living project, sister project of Station F. We've worked with some amazing companies like Urban Campus, like Sherry's. We're working with Bouygues Immobilier to develop their co-living product called Kumquat. And Matt, if you showed two images there, I think I'll just give you guys two kind of teaser images that we can share. Let's see. Well, we'll see if they come. There we are. So this is our project Flatmates. This was the co-living project of Station F. And then next is one of the first images of our concept for Kumquat. As it's going to come out, it's based around the idea of modularity of furniture that can transform throughout space. So those are really topics that we like to play with. How space can be used really efficiently, 24 hours of 24 hours for different usages, and how to really look into new usages of space today. So I'll look forward to connecting with you, and I'll hand the mic over to our next speaker.
Yeah, I think we are going to our lovely Laura.
Great.
You can have your slides in. Laura, please introduce yourself and let us know a little
intro.
bit more about you.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Super intro, Kelsey, about you. So I'm Laura, and I'm an architect and designer. I am very passionate about co-living since the last few years. I was previously working at Colonies as head of design and architecture, and I now recently joined Dove Vivo in its international expansion. So I'm responsible for the European part of product and design, but then also the construction part. So I'm well involved in the cost and sustainability, procurement, sourcing, etc. For the brand on the European level. And I think we have a little bit of slides. I can just tell you a little bit about my background on the next one, please. So I've also worked many years for Starbucks as a design and construction manager for on a European level. At Callison also, I was responsible for EU stores in the EU. Apple stores in the EU, sorry. And then I was for a long time also an architect at Foster and Partners. And if you go to the next slide, I can maybe just show you briefly who is Dove Vivo. It's a company that started as like a shared apartment, mostly for students. And our two founders started in 2007 by renovating the first flat. And you can see them here doing it with their own hands. And on the next slide, I can show you a little bit about how we think our spaces. So this is like a work in progress because we also are very big fans of sociology and culture and uses. So we're starting to analyze well all our different tenants, because we have obviously 8,000 tenants in Italy. So we have a lot of user research, both qualitative and quantitative. And then we're trying to put this into graphical images to show what that could mean throughout the day and what that means in terms of spaces and flexibility and sustainability. And on the next slide, I can just show you briefly. If we go to the next one,
I'm muted.
I think it's
sorry. I think we are going to Tom on the next slide. I'm sorry, Laura.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Tom, I think the floor is yours.
Thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. So my name is Tom Manwell. I'm the head of spatial design at Conscious Co-Living, and Conscious Co-Living is a design and operations experience company for creating co-living which really thrives and is sustainable and has well-being and community. And I'm also the founder and director of Well Studio Architecture, which is an architectural practice based in London, where we have a real ethos of well-being and designing spaces for well-being. So really grateful to be here. And I'm also actually in the process of creating a small co-living space here in London in my own flat to also experiment with some of the great design ideas which I think are possible when you start bringing in community into design and thinking really deeply about how people can socially interact and live together in a way which is well and sustainable and helps everyone thrive. So thank you very much for having me. Yeah, there are a few slides here so you can see Conscious Co-Living. We really started out and we really stood for the true potential of co-living in this industry to be a vehicle for a new way of living, a new paradigm of living, where people are connected to nature, are connected to each other, and also internally to themselves. And that's really, we still come from that place of really believing and standing for that ideal. Next slide.
I don't think I have a next slide.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem.
So we had a bit of a problem with the slides, and I'm really sorry, guys. I really apologize for that. So thank you very much for your introduction. And I know we have some questions, and I'm going to start with those one directly. I would like to address the first one to you, Laura. Well, starting with you, actually. How do you ensure that real estate developers and investors are confident in investing in co-living? Please share your top tips.
Yeah, and my top tip, I would love to share this one, which is really what we implement and how we gain confidence from investors in particular, right? It's really about standardized flexibility, or flexibility in a standardized way. That is that you have some core values, but you really need to stay flexible with your product and be able to go into any kind of real estate format, new, existing office building, small scale and large scale. I think that's one of the best ways to really show that you are varied and flexible enough in terms of designing your spaces. That's my top. Okay. That's my top tip.
Okay, that's a good one. Tom, would you like to add something?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'd start by offering some statistics around co-living to really make them confident that this is a great market to go into right now, such as in the last 3 years, Google searches for the term co-living have increased by 500%, and there's a lot of demand out there. I would also then talk about why we actually need co-living, and that there's an epidemic of loneliness in our cities. There's a whole bunch of people that young professionals that are looking for this model to be with other people, live with other people in a good way. And then there's all the benefits of co-living. And we also at Conscious Co-Living offer a financial modeling service for developers starting out on this journey, just to give them a quick high-level overview of what the return on investment might be for co-living on a certain site. And so that's also something we bring to the table there.
That's very good. 500% is a good increase, right?
Pretty awesome, isn't it? I mean,
yeah. And I think it's only going to grow in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So we can 10x it, I guess. Right, that's another number that we can use. How do you, this is going to be a little bit more open, but I'd like to start with you, Tom, if it's possible. How do you balance human well-being versus investment and space optimization?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is a really good question. And I mean, essentially, designing spaces for well-being is not rocket science. It really comes down to some very simple things. And essentially, a lot of these things, we would do as architects, we would look at the amount of natural light that we can get into spaces. Light and views out to nature are really, really important for human well-being. So the orientation of the building on the site, looking at maximizing natural light in spaces would be really important. Looking then at other, very simple factors like, getting the amount of the acoustics right in the building, and making sure that private spaces are separated from community spaces with good levels of acoustic insulation, so that you can have different activities going on in the same space. Looking at the heating of the building and making sure that works, and alongside that you have good levels of insulation. And then coming into more sensitive things like the touch of how you feel when you touch surfaces, and using natural materials where possible can really improve well-being, as well as looking at not just natural light, but artificial lighting and how that plays a part. Bringing all these things together, and then adding maybe some other elements like biophilic design, internal planting elements, green walls. The combination of all these quite simple elements, basically thoughtfully considered and balanced within a building, is what we experience as really creating the well-being that everyone talks about. So that's what we would bring to the table.
That's very nice and very inclusive and thoughtful. I wanted to ask you something, Kelsey, actually. Tom just touched on two things that really struck me, and that's because I really like those two elements in every single place where I go, and I think you can see here today as well. He was talking about the use of natural materials and also light. And I can see in one of the photos that you show in your little introduction before, especially that there was a lot of use of wood and a lot of light. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, obviously, when we can have a project with high ceilings, natural light, and wood, it's dreamy, huh?
All of them are like, we check our dreams.
Yeah, we check all of the boxes. So I think that's what everybody looks for in projects. That's the way people like to live. I think, everybody's had the experience of having to work in a place with horrible light and low ceilings and just feeling completely stuck. So I think there's tricks also as architects that we can use to make space feel larger than it actually is. Playing with light wells, playing with plants, we're working with a company in Norway to design sort of like ways of piping in natural light, sort of like the low line in New York, and being able to have really innovative ways of bringing more natural light solutions into space. But as Tom was saying, one thing that we really look for is like, how do we disassociate quality of space from its square meters? Because often all we talk about are how many square meters are a space, but you can be in a 20, 25 square meter space that's designed really, really well with a lot of natural light, with plants, that feels better than a 40 square meter space that's designed poorly and has poor light. So I think it's really about working with compact design, working with what you've got, and being able to be creative, and that's how we make space feel better despite its size.
Yeah, I really like what you just said about it's not the number of square meters, but it's actually what you do and how creative you can be with that. That makes it feel very different. I agree. I've walked into many places that are, you know, on paper really large and felt super claustrophobic. And then I walked into smaller places just because of the right, you know, design, the right material, the right colors, the right everything, the right windows, so the light just felt like so spacious and airy and everything. And I really like that.
Yeah, like what if we had a measurement for quality of natural light? And it was like 1 out of 10, you know, and you could really measure space not only with the quality of how big it is. And one thing we think a lot is like how many, when you walk into a space and you see it for the first time, do you see possibility, or are you immediately stuck in 1 or 2 ideas that the designer or architect has laid out for you beforehand? So like there's a great hotel we love in Amsterdam called the Volkshotel. And when you stay in this room, you go in and there's like 8 different places that you can sit in the room. And of course, you're not going to use every single one of them, but just this possibility gives you a different feeling than when you've walked into a hotel room and you see 1 desk and 1 chair and a bed. You just want out of there as fast as possible. So that's something that we think about a lot.
That's really nice. I seem to understand we have a question from the public. So my fantastic assistant, head of polls today, is going to go with it. Go for it.
Yes, we do, actually. Andre is asking if we could give price ranges to rooms design. If you have like different forks of ranges according to the quality.
Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that.
You go, Laura.
I'm a strong believer of that you can achieve quality with very little. Then there's 2 ways of looking at it. You can look at the works cost, and then you can obviously look at the FF&E investment, or as we're currently testing at the Vivo, and the way forward is with leasing, which is also a part of the way you can work to make it more sustainable, because then you have a company that leases you the FF&E. And it becomes more sustainable. But to talk about pricing, sure, but it also depends on the uses that you want to give to your provider and what spaces you have. So in co-living, typically you have the private space, the common space, and then like super common spaces if you're in a building. And so all these different spaces have different price tags on them. And it much depends on where you're located, and you have to do like a flow analysis and a usage analysis of the people that are going to live there and how they're going to use the space. And then there's obviously a price tag that comes with the type of furniture, but then you can spec anything from like a floss lamp to an IKEA lamp or a Leroy Merlin. But you have to decide what is the product that you're doing and who the end user is. So it's quite a complex analysis. But was the question more that you wanted an idea of a price? Then it also depends on the market and the country you're in, because even though we're in Europe based, but then if you look at the worldwide, but even Europe, there's a lot of difference. If I'm doing a project, for example, in Spain or Italy or in France, the prices vary a lot.
Yeah, I guess it's such a broad question. But I really like what you just said. It's the terminology that I'm going to use much more often. You said common room or common area and super common area. And I really like that, that type of differentiation, which I think you probably refer to something that brings even more people together. So within something, we can have like a little sort of a breakout common area, and then there will be like a super common area. But I really like that. I really like that. And talking about co-living and living together, I know, Kelsey, you have actually lived in a co-living project right? If I'm not wrong, and not very long ago, and you really liked it. What were the key learning from these experiences about design's role in the co-living itself?
Thanks, Kate. So yeah, I just lived in a pop-up co-living project in Guatemala called Experience House for a month, which was amazing and really nourished my understanding of co-living and gave me kind of first-person perspective of that I didn't have before. And something that really clicked and changed in my mind was, I used to say that design and architecture are everything for a co-living space, which I think is habit of all of us on this panel. And what I realized is really the people are everything in a co-living space. And no matter how good the design is, no matter how impressive, no matter how successful, if you don't curate the right people or you can't figure out how to get that community right, it's going to be just a nice hotel, right? It's going to be something different. And actually what resonated with me and what really I understand now is that design has a very important role to play in curating people, because what design does is it creates signaling. It allows people to feel attracted to a certain type of space or belonging in a certain type of space. So without that, kind of the more generic and across the board your design is, the more generic and across the board the community that you're going to be able to attract. So once you're able to differentiate and become very specific and kind of speak to the people that you'd like in your co-living space, you can be much more successful at curating. And this can actually help in the scalability of curating for a space, especially when we get into more niche co-living brands. So first was kind of like design is great, people are everything. Next is co-creation is kind of king. I really lived in a space where people were free to co-create not only the way the space was laid out and move everything around and transform the space all day, every day, but also where the programming and where the community facilitation was completely co-created. So everyone, we had basically a shared Google Calendar where everyone was free to pop in events, workshops, dinners, parties, yoga classes, etc., and then transform the space accordingly. And this really gave everyone a real feeling of ownership over the space, which I think is missing sometimes in more big box co-living products. People just feel they're being moved into a product and it's not really theirs. So appropriation of the space through design was something that I was really confronted with and felt great about.
Appropriation of the space, I really like that. Two things I learned today. Appropriation of the space and super common room. Your turn now, Tom, to let me grasp something. But on a serious note, I know, Tom, you were just talking about the fact that you are working on your co-living space in London, if I'm not wrong, but you also lived before in a co-living space. Can we ask you a little bit, I would like to ask you pretty much the same question. What were the key learning from these experiences about actually the design role in co-living?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, yeah, I've lived in a number of different co-living spaces and community houses, throughout growing up. And I've always had a love and an interest of actually how is it that people interact within these spaces. And yeah, I mean, essentially, I agree with Kelsea that I think the physical environment that you create and then the kind of user profile, as it were, or the type of user of that environment has to be right from ideally the beginning of the project thought through as a sort of piece together. And it's really about, certain spaces will work for some people, they won't work for other people. Certain sizes of community space will work for some people and not for others. Certain facilities may, for some types of people, be shared, and that can work really well, or for other types of people, actually, they would need their own individual facilities. So I think really looking at the user profiles from the beginning, doing some research, and we always try to enroll our clients in this idea. It might cost a little bit more money at the beginning, but it's really, really worth it further down the line, because then you really understand your customer. And once you understand your customer, you can also apply that same understanding to the spatial design and look at which kind of spaces would really work, which kind of amenities would really work within a co-living building. And yeah, I mean, curating is super important as well, because you don't want to get down the line having done all this thought and then just cram in you know, kind of anyone that will pay the price. It's more about looking at, you know, who is this really suited for? And then, you know, bearing in mind, there's such a huge demand for co-living. You can afford to have a curation process, which does find people that really match and work well together within the spaces. And I think if you get that right as well, and it does require quite a lot of thought, actually, then it can be a really thriving space. But I totally also agree with Kelsey on the adaptability side. I think that is also a major part of any design process, is building in the adaptability of the space, so that the users can adapt and alter the space to suit their needs as time progresses.
Right, thank you very much. That's very true. We've been talking about community and the importance of it for the past few minutes, and we really reflected on that. So I'd like to go over to you, Laura, and ask you the next question, which is, what are the most important ingredients to build sustainable co-living spaces, but also thriving an authentic community? And how do you think we can address those ones through design?
Extremely tricky question. I think it's a little bit as what Tom was saying, and Kelsey as well. The design has a certain part, but I think here, like if we go again from like the different degrees of privacy that you have in the spaces, from your private to the extremely communal spaces, or super common spaces, there's degrees there. I think in the private space, it has to be like Guy was saying earlier today, like you can shape this space as long as you apply it to the brand values, right, that you keep within those ones. But then it's also about making them feel responsible and making them feel like it's their space all the way to the common space and the super common space, and leaving flexibility in spaces in terms of uses, not necessarily by like moving walls and doing really complex things that are then going to cost a fortune, because it's also about balancing the tenant happiness and their uses versus the investment that you put in, because the rent has to also be at a level. Because if I make a super cool like retail looking space like Gucci, the rent is going to be obviously too high for any tenant to be in it, no matter how cool it is. So it's important to have that balance as a base, but then how you create the real community, I think it has a lot to do with local relevance, then to bring in the local architectural features of the building that helps people really feel at home. As we were also saying, it has to be their home, like co-living. At least for us, it's not like short term, but it's really your long-term solution for like 6 months, a year, or longer. So the goal is like to have them stay longer and really be together. And obviously that has a lot to do on the operational side and customer care. Like how do we match tenants, which is a whole different science. So on the design part, to be honest, it's a very tricky equation that I'm still learning about. It's extremely complex, yeah.
But I think still learning about something is also a really good thing, right? Because it keeps us motivating. And plus, if you learn something that is relevant today, we can see how quick, especially in the last year, right, the world changes and needs changes. Like I was listening to another talk about designers and future of housing and how it's going to be. And some of the designers were saying how open spaces recently have gone totally off. Like people are not asking them. They want actually more separation. And I'm not talking just about co-living. I'm talking about just generally. So more separation, because if they need to stay at home and if they all need to work from home, working together in just one room might become a little bit of a problem. So everything changes so quickly. Would you like to add something, Kelsey? I can see you were nodding a lot while Laura was speaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great comments. Thanks. I think one thing we really address as designers and architects, and looking at the budding industry of co-living and looking at the evolution of the residential real estate industry in general, is the challenge of how to brand a residential product. We're taking a lot of notes from hotel, and we're taking a lot of notes from co-working also. But the challenge with residential, and it's quite fine, right, is that people actually don't want to live in brands. So the nuance is, how do we create residential products that are branded enough to create harmony across a portfolio of products, and where people enter a space and say, ah, I recognize this is X brand, without it feeling suffocating and without it feeling overwhelming, and allowing people to still, as I said before, appropriate the space, because you want to live in a space that feels like your own. So how do you scale a product that feels like someone's own space for 150 different people, maybe in large-scale co-living projects? And that's really the challenge that we're working with, and that we put a lot of attention into. I mean, I think this is why We Live got such a kind of a dystopian impression, when people felt like, I don't want to live and work and sleep, and we live, we work, we grow, we everything, because it feels like that's not mine. So I think that's really a challenge that we're working with, and it can be solved. But it's something to keep out for. And the next is, I think, and we think as a studio, that the kitchen for co-living needs to be completely reimagined. So we're still today, many projects that we see and many architects are still retrofitting a very traditional kitchen into a completely new scenario for residential. So we ask ourselves, you know, like, what would it be like if the kitchen that's going to be shared by 4, 6, 8, 10 people was actually designed to be shared by 4, 6, 8, 10 people? How might it look completely different than it does today? Maybe there's 3 sinks. And what we found is, like, people really kind of fight around water, fire, and fridge space. So one big project we've had over the last year, and we were invited professors at the at Die Angewandte in Vienna, School of Industrial Design, and we spent a year analyzing this problem with about 40 design students, looking at, you know, what is the future of the kitchen in the post-traditional family, post-mononuclear family. So I think this is going to be a real cool thing that we see in co-living, is when we start to really play and dig into what are the specifics of this space and how can we design it differently. And I think the kitchen and the eating space is where most community is born, lives, and thrives. That's a natural spot of gravity for any house. So I think once we can crack this, and we're already working on some really cool projects that are taking this as its forefront, we'll see some pretty awesome shifts in how communities can take place inside of co-living.
So, thank you for that. During your slides before, you revealed a little something, and I thought that was already a big revelation, and now you have another one still. That because you want to be invited into another panel to have another big revelation. So you are booked already for the next time. But talking about what is going to happen in the future and how we need to maybe envision, I'd like to go back to you, Tom, and ask you this question. What are, in your opinion, the direct environmental impacts in the positive direction whilst doing co-living for now and towards 2050 and onwards?
Thank you. Yeah, well, that's a great question, Kate. I mean, it's a really big question. I mean, essentially, you know, if you look at the situation we're in globally right now, we have the climate crisis. We have, like I was saying, after the pandemic, even more so, an epidemic of loneliness and mental health difficulties. And we also have obesity, and we have a need to reconnect with each other. And I think essentially co-living can be the answer to a lot of these questions in creating a new way that we live together. And sustainability is very much possible with co-living in a number of ways. I think firstly, if you design the co-living buildings in cities that are near transport hubs, which allow for residents to not need cars and to be able to cycle or walk to the other parts of the city, or use public transport, then that really can minimize carbon footprints on a larger scale. And if you connect the co-living building that you're creating into the local neighborhoods and networks, again, it means that you can share amenities with neighbors, and that again reduces carbon footprint. Then if you think about individual co-living clusters in a building and the number of shared appliances that one would have. You can cut down individual carbon footprints because not everyone needs a washing machine, not everyone needs individual fridges, individual appliances. So the actual energy consumption per person can be reduced in this way. And then on the other scale of it, you know, it's about the building fabric and actually looking at that fabric and saying, what's the low-hanging fruit if you're retrofitting a building? What's the low-hanging fruit we can easily use here to reduce our carbon footprint? So it might be wall insulation, it might be floor insulation, it might be upgrading the windows to triple glazed, better U values, and then really looking at, okay, and then the leftover energy that is needed for this building, can we use sustainable energy sources like photovoltaic panels, air source heat pumps, to then provide that energy. So, and then of course, that's just on the building side, but then operationally as well, you know, recycling policies and other policies that can be put in place. And all these things can also improve well-being because, for instance, if you have your, you know, vegetable garden where you grow some of your own food, then that has a well-being benefit as well as a sustainability impact. And so again, I think it's very much a case of tying these different ideas together and looking for where you can hit the kind of win-win situations with some of these design decisions to create really sustainable co-living. But I mean, we at Conscious Co-Living totally stand for co-living being sustainable and moving forward, see it as really one of the big solutions to the climate crisis on the residential side of things.
Thank you very much. And Tom, just to let you know, sometimes when you move around, we can hear a little noise from your mic. So just, and it's harder sometimes to hear you. So just be a bit careful on that. And Laura, I saw that you were nodding a lot, like, you know, moving your pretty hair as well. Whilst Tom was talking, would you like to add something into that?
Oh, I can just add, and I totally agree. And as Tom was saying, maybe I can add like on another macro level without going into details. For 2050, I mean, most of the buildings that we're going to be in are going to be the existing ones in cities. So all of the existing urban tissue or fabric that we can see, co-living is a great opportunity to go into those like abandoned office buildings that have been standing empty for 10 years, because traditional residential wouldn't be able to because of the depths of the building, whereas co-living has a great opportunity to also use those semi-obscure spaces to create those super common spaces, study rooms, working lounges, a gym, laundry spaces, whatever. So it's a great opportunity. And then also, obviously, by taking apartments for those buildings and densifying. So in terms of optimizing spaces, I think it's a great catalyzer for ecology as a whole, because then we don't have to build a huge mass, because new construction is great when it's sustainable, and obviously all new buildings have to be, but still reusing the older buildings that are already existing is even more so, like Tom was saying, and changing the windows and upgrading the building itself, as it's just standing there and taking up space in the city.
Yeah, and I followed what you've been doing recently with Dove Vivo and also your input, and I can see in your eyes how excited you get when you talk about that, especially like repurposing certain darker areas in a house. And really yeah, exactly, look at that how she's happy when she's posting about that. Look at my transformation. I mean, what you've done recently, and it's very impressive, so congratulations on that. But still touching on a little bit about the future, and I'm very conscious of the fact that we've got only a few minutes left. I would like to close this fantastic panel by asking the last question to all of you, and is any key design trends emerging that we should all keep on our radar for the next year ahead? I know you've said something about the kitchens already and your idea, but would you like to add something else to that?
Sure. I'll add just a few things I have in mind for that. First is going to be the continued growth of rural and retreat co-living spaces and pop-up co-living projects. I think these more like 1 month, 2 month in different locations all around the world are going to continue to grow, and then how design influences that will be its question. Exploration and typologies according to how society is evolving, so more types of shared space, different kind of niching of co-living. I think we're also looking at furniture that will be designed specifically for co-living with that in mind. Keep an eye out for Cutwork in the next year. We're going to be releasing a new collection of furniture specifically for that and around kitchens. And then I think we're also looking at continued interest and demand for sustainable materials. Basically, all of our clients are asking for that now, where before it was really just a niche. Now it's become sort of a foundation and a prerequisite. And it's not just for marketing anymore, which is beginning to be a really nice change in the industry. And the big one will be, as Laura just mentioned, you said it beautifully, the transformation of office space into habitat space, and how this is going to be, I think, a big opportunity in co-living for the years to come.
Thank you very much. Laura, finishing thoughts on that, please?
No, a finishing thought is one you said earlier, Cate, about natural materials. I think that's like going back to some human basics, a little bit like Gaetan was doing earlier today with the human brain. And like we feel good in nature. So I think one of the parts of well-being is going back to those solid natural materials. And basically, I think my top tip to conclude would be to keep it simple. I think the simpler and more user-friendly, just like simple, not complicating things is the way forward.
Grazie, Laura. Over to you, Tom.
Sure, thank you, Cate. I mean, I think, yeah, Kelsea got there first with the office space to co-living transition, but I do believe that's going to be a big factor in the next couple of years as people come out of the pandemic and those remote working practices continue. And I think, you know, can see that happening all in global cities around the world. I think it's a great opportunity, actually. And I think also there's an opportunity for kind of co-living and co-working spaces combined in some of those areas where people maybe come in to the office a couple of days a week and want to live in the city for a few days a week, but then maybe go back into the countryside. So there's those. I think also, again, echoing Laura's point on natural materials, I think it's a wider thing as well. I think it's about connection to nature. I think that there's going to be a huge growth in connection to nature demand, essentially. And I think that's really been happening because, again, through the lockdowns, people having gardens and experiencing how much well-being they get from just having a little garden space. I think, you know, all of these kind of natural materials, connection to nature, appreciation of natural light, and good spaces with sunlight as well. People are really going to value, and that's something that we offer very much through Well Studio and at Conscious Co-Living, is creating spaces like that. So yeah, very exciting few years ahead, I think, for co-living, and I think essentially it's going to mature as well as an industry, and there'll be more and more variety of co-living spaces on offer in the marketplace to different types of users. So yeah, really excited about the future.
Well, me too, actually. I'm really excited about the next few minutes as well, and you will see why if you stay in. But before we go, I would like to really thank you very much. I think we shared a lot of knowledge. I've learned a lot, some new terminology. I learned that I'm looking forward to see what you guys are doing in the next few months, and I'm looking forward to have you back on one of our panels very, very soon. And yeah, thank you very, very much. Please drop your details in the chat so everybody who would like to connect, who is with us right now, can do so. And I think we are going to the next one. Yeah, so thanks again.
A big thank you to Cate, our host, who coordinated, organized. She's kind of the queen of co-living, so we all get
lastminutespresentations.com.
She bared with all of our lastminutepresentations.com. So thanks, Cate.
Okay. Well,